Hello and welcome to Trash Compactor. I'm Josh. You may have noticed over these last 40-something episodes that we have a certain fixation with George Lucas. What he thinks, what makes him tick, why he does the things that he does. But there is someone whose obsession with George Lucas rivals ours. He's an actor and comedian named Connor Ratliff who pretends to be George Lucas as host of the George Lucas Talk Show, a live comedy show that imagines a retired George Lucas as the host of an actual, honest-to-God talk show, which is equal parts hilarious, irreverent, and charming, and the show has built a serious following over the years. And joining us today is Patrick Cotnoir, producer of the George Lucas Talk Show, to talk about the new documentary film, I'm George Lucas, a Connor Ratliff Story, which chronicles a year in the life of the George Lucas Talk Show and turns into an insightful meditation on creativity, failure, and what it means to be successful. So without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome Patrick Cotnoir to Trash Compactor. Thanks for doing this, Patrick.
Thank you for having me. I'm psyched to be here.
So first I want to talk a little bit about the George Lucas Talk Show itself, and then we'll move on to the doc. I tried to very briefly summarize it in the intro, but for our listeners who may not be familiar with the George Lucas Talk Show, how do you explain what it is to people?
Yeah, I mean, this is the question we've been trying to figure out for 10 years, right? This is the hard thing to get it down into an elevator pitch. But it's a talk show that is hosted by George Lucas. That is the most boiled down, when you turn wood into paper, that's what it is in the end. But Connor Ratliff plays George Lucas. His sidekick is Watto, played by comedian Griffin Newman from Blank Check and The Tick and so many other things. And he hosts a talk show just like any other talk show. It's as if George Lucas took over for James Corden when he left CBS. Same thing. We have real guests as themselves. George and Watto and now myself ask them questions, about either projects that they're currently promoting or projects from their past, and that's kind of it. I mean, it evolves into madness usually, but the general starting off point is it's a talk show, and that's it. And if you know anything about Star Wars, that's great, and if you don't know anything about Star Wars, that's also fine. It'll work for anyone. We hope.
Yeah. So. And I know you cover this in the doc, but just briefly, how did you get involved as producer of the show?
Yeah, so I went to college in New York City. I went to Pace University, and I was going to the UCB Theater a lot in New York, seeing a bunch of different shows. I eventually started going to this show called The Chris Gethard Show, which was a live talk show on New York City public access. People would call in. It was very weird, very alt comedy kind of thing. And one of the people who did a lot of stuff there was Connor Ratliff, a comedian who was on a bunch of different teams at UCB. He was acting and stuff. He was on TV, stuff like that. But he was always a guy where I was like, oh, this guy's really funny. I can tell that I should go to everything that he does. It's easy when you're like, that's the guy. I like that guy. I'm going to, try to go to every show that he puts up. And he had put up a few things at UCB that they were funny, but they weren't clicking with audiences. People weren't showing up, so they didn't get longer runs. And then he sort of realized, oh, I need a hook for my show. I can't just do like the Connor Ratliff talk show because nobody knows who I am. So I like Star Wars. This is Connor talking in my voice. I like Star Wars. I like talk shows. Let me try to combine those two things because people like Star Wars. People will show up if there is something Star Wars-y in the title. And he had been doing a George Lucas impression for his friends for years just to make his friends laugh. So I went to the first show, and like 20 minutes before the show, I got a text from him saying, so-and-so who was supposed to do warm-up for the show just bailed. I need you to do it. And I, was not an actor, not a performer. I had acted in high school and sort of like got it out of my system, but was done with it and wasn't really looking to do any more of it. So I said, no, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. And he said, no, I really need you. I don't know who else is coming. Can you just do this? And I'd gone to enough real, quote unquote, real TV talk shows to know the general cadence of a warm-up comic, who's here from out of town, who likes Star Wars, what's your favorite Star Wars movie, that kind of stuff. And I sort of just stretched until I felt like I'd done enough time and he could come out. And I went to the show for a few months after that and started helping him set up, just because I was his friend, set up the chairs before the show, and I would film the shows in the front row with the my cell phone up against my chest, which you see a lot of it in the doc. All the old footage from the old shows is mostly like me shooting that just for posterity's sake. And then a few months in, we were talking to someone in the bar at the UCB in the East Village, and he introduced me as Patrick, my producer. And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, that's not. We've never talked about that. I'm just the guy who shows up and like sometimes helps you set up chairs." And he goes, "No, I've always considered you my producer." And now we're, 10 years into it, and I'm still doing it. So that's the short version of the story, which is also pretty long.
Well, that's interesting because actually you kind of answered this already. But one of my questions was, why George Lucas? Why not like the Steven Spielberg talk show or
Sure.
something along those lines? But it seems like it really came out of Connor's existing love and perhaps obsession or preoccupation. How about that with
Yeah.
Star
Yeah.
Wars and George Lucas? And I guess I'm wondering, like, were you a Star Wars fan? And if not, have you become one in the last 10 years?
Yeah, no, I definitely was. The first thing I remember for like, it's always been there, but the first time I remember seeing it was the special editions in the theaters. I don't know if I saw them before that or they were just around before that. And no one in my family seems to really remember, when it got introduced. My aunt had a lot of Star Wars stuff because she was, growing up when the original trilogy was coming out. So she had left a lot of Star Wars stuff at my grandparents' house. And I obviously was over there a lot and would, read the books and stuff like that. But I remember going to the theaters for the special editions, going to Taco Bell, getting all the toys, stuff like that. And then, I was like, it was 7 when Phantom Menace came out, which is kind of like the perfect age for that. And I was fully prequels pilled. I was like all in on the prequels. The first two especially, Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones were like huge for me. And then I was sort of out a little bit by Revenge of the Sith. And I only know that because I don't have any toys from it, And I feel like that's like a good indicator of like, are you still in or are you out if the toys were still being purchased. But my friend Sean, who lived down the street from me, my best friend at the time, his mother worked at Lego because the Lego North American headquarters was my hometown. So we had a lot of family and family friends and friends' parents and stuff like that who were, working at Lego. And we got to go to an early screening of Revenge of the Sith. And I remember being like really psyched for that, like a week early or something like that. It was really exciting. But then after that, it sort of died down for a little bit. I was still like into it, but I think I bought into the narrative of these prequels are bad, And that wasn't, I don't think that was really what I thought, but I think it was just like that was the pervasive attitude at the time, so it felt like, well, this is how I need to feel too, So I sort of like took a backseat a little bit, would still duck in every so often, but I was not like watching Clone Wars every week. I was not, doing all that stuff. And then when this started up is sort of when it revamped itself. It was a little over what would it be? It'd be like a year and a half before Force Awakens, I think it started. Something like that. And, now I'm fully back and there's no getting out of it, for better or for worse.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and you're right. Like around that time, Star Wars was kind of the interest in Star Wars was kind of rekindled in
Yeah.
the lead up to Force Awakens in a big way. I was going to ask you, but you kind of answered it a little bit. Why you think, as a Star Wars fan, as a George Lucas fan
Mm-hmm.
or appreciator or whatever you want to say, like I never really thought that George Lucas would resonate with a larger non-Star Wars nerd audience in the way that
Yeah.
it seems to have with your show. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about how that works or why it works.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I think, our George, and I have to distinguish this, our George he is very similar to actual George. But at the same time, it's sort of like a Back to the Future alternate reality, like he veers off and becomes a lot goofier, a lot sillier, a lot, he has knowledge on different topics just because that's how Connor works. So I think a lot of people who watch our show, I don't think a lot of people, I know a lot of people who watch our show don't, pardon my French, don't give a shit about Star Wars, you know? and like they like our show, but they don't care about Star Wars, and especially the discourse around Star Wars. It's as you know, exhausting a lot of the times. But they like George and they like Watto, and even though they don't care about Star Wars, our version of George and Watto seems to have like endeared those two characters, quote unquote, to a lot of people online, and I don't totally know why that is beyond the fact that Connor and Griffin are very charismatic, you know, and they can tell that they care about George and Star Wars and also each other, and I think that that really helps. There's a lot of people who we have talked about for years. We've been talking about this museum that George is building here in LA. He's building the George Lucas Museum of Narrative Art, and people watch the show and think that we're making it up, because it sounds so crazy that they think, oh, that's another bit that they're doing, and then they'll hear something about the real museum and be like, wait, that's real? That's a real thing? Which I find so funny. But I think, I don't know why it is so impactful for people who don't really care about George. I think it's people realize that he's a guy. It's a fascinating story because he's a guy who like has done so much for the world, the entertainment industry, the film industry, the art industry, and just like also charities. He gives so much money to charities. Like, such an interesting guy that he's impacted everyone's life, whether you like Star Wars or not. So it is like a fascinating person to be like, what's this guy like? What's this guy's deal? And I guess you can sort of get a feel for that, even if you're not watching the real guy and you're watching, a hairsprayed Connor Ratliff do it for 4 hours at a time or whatever it is. I don't know. I don't know if that answered your question, but
No, you definitely answered my question. A part of it, I guess, is just like the like weird magical alchemy of like why anything works or why anything connects with an audience. But yeah, I think you're right. I find when I encounter someone who clearly has a ton of enthusiasm and love for something, even if it's not something I am necessarily that interested in, the enthusiasm for it is infectious. Like
sure.
I can tell this is something worth caring about, and then I can sort of experience it vicariously through them. So maybe that's a part of it. And there's also something to I think Connor said this in the doc, but he was talking about how George Lucas is such an interesting figure because by basically any metric, he's like one of the most successful creative figures that has ever lived. But on the other hand, he's also had a string of enormous failures.
Yeah.
And there are some who would maybe think of him that way as like a
Yeah.
failure in certain respects. And the idea that you have this figure who's like enormously successful, enormously impactful, as you've said, but also has this like weird group of haters that think he's responsible for destroying their childhoods and
Yeah.
like ruining. I mean, there's something compelling in that. It's like a figure
Oh,
who's
totally.
successful and is like kind of equal parts beloved and reviled, and I guess
Yeah.
it's also there's also something kind of like safe and charming about it because we're not talking about like the president of the United States
Sure.
or like Elon Musk. It's like a guy who made a movie that a lot of people like.
But also the interesting thing is, with all of those quote unquote failures, your Howard the Ducks, your More American Graffitis, your whatever Strange Magics, you can still find 5 or 6 things in each of those movies where you're like, yeah, but that like changed how things were made. Attack of the Clones.
Totally.
Now movies are shot digitally. Whatever. Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. Whatever you think of Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, they did so many things. They shot that TV show in so many different countries and locations, and also used CG for a lot of stuff in that, which was not being done on TV. Like, you can find things in all of these that like truly changed the world. So like, even though it's a failure, ultimately it's a success because it did help a lot of people out down the road.
Completely, 100%. And that's, one of the things when Connor said that in the movie, I was like, wow, that's really true. Like, what is
Yeah.
the measure of success or failure? Who gets to judge? And like, when is it enough for people on the outside looking in, but also for yourself? And I was really, I was talking about this at the top, but I was really unexpectedly, moved a little bit because I didn't realize. I guess I should have guessed from the subtitle. It's called "I'm George Lucas: A Connor Ratliff Story,"
Uh-huh.
but I was really taken in by the sort of musings on what it means to be successful and like
Hmm.
how failures impact us. And I thought, I found the journey Connor has been on, his reflecting about it, and also where he has come to now to be very compelling. And I was
Yeah.
like, wow, like he made me, as someone who's also in a creative field, who's like, what does success even look like? Maybe sometimes you have to redefine what it is just for your own contentment and peace of mind. It's like, yeah, like the idea that, even George Lucas, like what more can you do?
Hmm.
And I don't know. I think there's something sort of inherently comedic about the notion of him in retirement and the
Yeah.
idea that he would choose to spend his time doing this show. I think
Uh-huh.
is pretty funny just in and of itself.
Yeah.
Um, just out of curiosity, like, uh, so you've been doing this for 10 years now.
Yeah.
What's the arc of your career like? Like, how do you see yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely changed since that show started. I'm when I started working there, I was living in New York. I was fairly fresh out of college, like pretty within a couple of years of being out of college, and still like trying to figure out what I wanted to do in the industry, in that city, in my life, that kind of thing. And now I'm a talent booker and a casting person and a producer, and just kind of like bopping around for whatever seems interesting. I think there's so many jobs in this industry that are boring, to be blunt about it, boring and like not exciting for me, and I had to go through a lot of those jobs to figure out what I liked and what I didn't like. And now at this point I've done enough of those things to like narrow it down to be like those things are fun, casting and talent wrangling and talent booking, all that stuff, that's fun to me and I really enjoy that. But also at the same time, if something else popped up, I would do it. So I'm not, putting in stone that this is what I want to do. It's just like, this is what I'm doing right now that I'm enjoying. And if something else pops up, I'm happy to change that and happy to figure out, oh, actually, this is the thing I like. So I always tell people, producer, talent booker, casting director, because that's been the day job for 10 years, has just been, talent booking pretty much. I haven't had a non-talent booking job since, God, I couldn't even tell you. Like 2016, probably something like that. So it's cool to be like working in the field of the thing that you're enjoying. And it's an interesting job. Every day is different. Every job is different. It can be exhausting, but it can also be, getting to do some of the things that I've gotten to done over the last 10 years is like mind-boggling to me. And the people that I've met and the people that I'm friendly with and friends with now, would blow my mind if you told me when I was growing up. And that's really cool for me. And, that's part of the reason why I like this show is like, especially during COVID, like we were doing a 4+ hour show every single week and needed like 3 to 4 guests every single week, probably. And it was truly like, oh, who do I just want to hang out with? Who do I want to like meet? That's who I'm going to book on this show. So that is, that's kind of how I define myself, is like a producer and talent person who's working on things that he enjoys and kind of avoiding the boring fallings of a lot of gigs here in this industry. I think that's a pretty good summation of it.
That actually kind of dovetails nicely into my next question, like
Yeah.
how you approach guests or how you come up with who to approach. You spoke a little about that, but for example, do you, and it's probably changed from when you started the show to where you are now, but like, do you try to think of someone who might appreciate the gag, or is it
Hmm.
like someone who is completely blank to Star Wars and George Lucas and is totally bewildered by the whole thing?
Yeah, I think it's a case by case basis. I think I can basically tell who's gonna go for it and who's not at this point. There haven't been many people who have not. I could count on one hand like the people who have been problems, I guess is the best, where you're like in the middle of the show being like, come on, man, just like play along for an hour. That's all we need. But rarely happens though. So I think it truly depends on like does this person seem fun? Do I think that they would have a good time? Because I don't want to book someone if I don't think they're gonna have a good time. Like, why are we wasting anyone's time if that's the case? And I don't want someone to do the show and then look back and be like, oh yeah, I'm not happy I did that. That's not exciting for me. That feels like pretty obvious, but I also think, a lot of people get stuck doing shows or interviews or whatever where they're like, this isn't fun, this isn't exciting, why am I doing this? And I don't want that. I want to run into someone 3 years from now and be like, oh, you did this thing, and they're like, yes, that was crazy. Like, I want them to remember it positively. And I think it really, during lockdown we would do a lot of fundraisers where we would watch like a season of a canceled TV show, like a show that only lasted one season, Studio 60 or Josh Gad's White House comedy 1600 Penn, things like that. And we would have cast and crew from the show on while we were watching it, raising money for charity. And it sort of became this like weird retrospective for a lot of people because they're like, I've never talked about this show because it was only on for 8 episodes and then it got canceled. Like, no one has ever asked me about this. So we would have, like costume people on or writers on or like, the animal wrangler, like weird people, not weird people, but, people who you would not expect to be on this show. And that was very exciting for me because these people, A, never got to talk about these things. B, never get to go on talk shows to talk about these things. And C, now have to play along like they are speaking to a Toydarian, So that is exciting for me, where like you're getting this like 70-year-old character actor who doesn't know anything about Star Wars, and he has to be like, well, yeah, Watto, of course, that's true. And it makes me laugh every single time. And those are the people that I'm the most excited for. We had Julian Glover on, General Veers himself, Walter Donovan from Last Crusade. Yeah.
Wow, I must have missed that one. That's amazing. He's like 106 years old.
He's like 106 years old. And it was on a show that we did where we only had guests on who had worked with Harrison Ford. It was like a 18-hour long show. We did it for a charity that Harrison's on the board of, that like pilots donate their time to like fly kids to get medical care different places around the country if they like aren't near a hospital or whatever. And it was in the month of February, so he called it Ford v February, which was a terrible pun. But he was on. He obviously has no idea who the character Watto is,
Right.
And Griffin was not there at the beginning of the interview when he did it. He popped in like midway through, and he just 90-year-old Julian Glover just goes, "Oh, there's a man with a nose here now." And I thought it was so funny that from that point on, he just had to buy into whatever the hell was going on in this interview. And he did it, and it ruled, So stuff like that is what I like the most when I'm looking for a guest, is like, who do I just have a weird gut feeling that they will enjoy this? Yeah.
No, I like that. Is that episode or segments of that episode available on like your YouTube channel?
Oh yeah, it's all on YouTube. Yeah. Everything we have done since May 2020 is on YouTube. So it's like there's probably 500 hours of stuff on YouTube.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. Yeah. I was going through and you can spend a lot of time on your YouTube channel. Like there's a lot of stuff.
You can spend 500 hours on it.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the Naboo Movie show that you guys did. Could you talk a little about where the idea for that came from and like how it was put together?
Yeah, so the Naboo Movie was something we did in May 2024. We did a staged reading for the 25th anniversary of The Phantom Menace. And I fully cast it with, like Haley Joel Osment was Anakin and Tony Hale was Qui-Gon and Bobby Moynihan was Darth Maul and Yoda. It was truly like an insane cast of these people reading this movie. And it started because we're friends with the guys who do the Star Wars Minute podcast, which is a podcast where they go minute by minute through every Star Wars movie. And they came to me and said, hey, we have this idea. It feels like you would be the right person to help us do this. And they were right. They were right. It was like, it was combining everything I wanted to do, casting and Star Wars and live, live shows in LA and stuff like that. And it was one of the most fun things I've ever done. It was one of the things I'm the most proud of. And, we didn't do any rehearsal. we got people who loved Star Wars, and we got people who, like, I don't think had ever seen the movie. I didn't ask anyone who's seen the movie who hadn't seen the movie, but like there were some people up there where I'm like, I don't think you've seen this, but it rules because you're getting a completely fresh take on this script. And there's like, there's lines in that movie. I love that movie so much. It's one of my favorites, but there's lines in that movie where you're like, I don't know how someone can read this and make it sound good. And then someone would say it on the stage, and you'd be like, oh, that's how you say it and make it sound good. They did it. Like, I never expected that line to work, and it just worked right there. So yeah, I mean, we did it at this place called Dynasty Typewriter in LA. It's up on YouTube now. We're doing more soon.
Oh, yes? Really?
Episode 2 will be happening very soon. It went very well.
Yeah, I saw the promotion about it. I unfortunately wasn't able to make it because I'm a dad now. I have certain obligations in the evenings and weekends, but I was so glad you guys put it up on YouTube, and I watched it last week, and I was like, this is hilarious. And I think you're exactly right. It was such a great mix. You could tell, like, this person knows the movie or they know Star Wars. This person, I mean, like you said, I think they're reading this for the first time and encountering it for the first time. But the combination of the two was so great because they're each funny for different reasons.
Totally.
Yeah.
And there's multiple performances in that are now, like, my definitive version of this character. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, oh, that's great. Love Jar Jar, love everything Ahmed did. Big Jar Jar guy right here. But Eric Bauza did it in the reading, he does all the Looney Tunes voices, or a lot of the Looney Tunes voices. And he did Jar Jar as Daffy Duck, like as if Daffy Duck was reading the script for Jar Jar. And it was truly amazing. Just like being like, oh yeah, Jar Jar is kind of a Looney Tune. And like hearing it actually done like a Looney Tune, you're like, wow, this also works. This is a different way to do this character, but it also works very well, which is very cool,
No, that was one of the standout performances. I mean, everyone was great. Everyone brought something. Like, it was a really, really wonderful show. I can't emphasize that enough. So well done.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the documentary a little bit. First of all, what did you think when you saw it the first time? Was it what you expected, or was it sort of a surprise? Like, oh, I didn't know it was gonna be like this.
I mean, I was a co-producer on it, and I was a co-producer because I was sort of the conduit between the show and the doc, so whenever they needed something from the show, I would be that guy. So I saw it fairly early. We didn't make it because you're not supposed to make a documentary about yourself, so these filmmakers came in, they made it, but I saw a fairly early cut, and I was around for a lot of the filming, but there's also a lot of stuff in it that I had never seen before. All the interviews with Connor and him going to his parents was new for me. And also the thing that I'm the happiest that it exists is there's a point, mild spoilers for a documentary about a Star Wars talk show incoming. There's a point, where COVID happens. I don't know if you heard, there was a worldwide pandemic. It all shut down. Anyways, and a friend of mine goes to the UCB theater to go pick up all of our stuff, and like driving through New York and getting all of this and bringing it back to my house in Queens. And that was the most interesting thing for me, just because like none of us were there. None of us knew what that theater looked like once everything was shut down. It's also like the last time any of us will probably ever see that theater. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to go back probably. So it's like this weird like coda on our lives that didn't really feel like it had closure, None of us knew when we went to that theater that it was the last time we were going to be going to that theater. So being able to see that in the movie, I think was interesting. And I think, they captured a really cool portrait of like kind of the last moments of what it was like to produce a live comedy show without any famous people, on the staff or, on stage, in New York City. And it's different now. New York comedy changed post-COVID, and that world is gone, and that world's not probably coming back. So like getting to like show this to people to be like, well, this is what it was like, in those years pre-COVID, is exciting for me. So it's cool for me. I've seen it so many times. I would love to never see it again because I've seen it so many times, once you see a movie 9 times about yourself and about your friends, like, you're like, I got it. But at the same time, this movie was made for fans of the show, but also like a 15-year-old kid in Iowa who like loves comedy and never gets to go to these kind of things because they don't have theaters like this in Iowa or whatever, wherever. It's made for them, and it's made for, when Connor and I were teenagers, hearing about comedy shows in LA or New York and being like, man, I wish I could go to that. I wish I knew what that looked like. I'm only reading about it, on a website or whatever. You can kind of see what that was like. Now, most of this doc was made before almost all of our show was streaming. So the original intent of this doc was like, this is what this weird show is. You'll probably never see it, And now that has changed. So it is interesting to like see what they went through, having to adjust and having to change, what the original intent of that doc was.
No, completely, because so the doc was shot in 2019, which is now 5 years ago, and it's funny because there's a moment in the doc where they ask Connor, they say, "You've been doing this for 5 years. Do you see yourself doing this in another 5 years?" And I don't think the intention was to wait 5 years to release it, so it's just sort of a happy accident.
Yeah.
And it is funny because like you do get a sense. It's sort of a last glimpse of that pre-COVID world where, like, there was a funny moment I noticed when Connor was like video chatting with his childhood friend, and he says something like, "Oh, I've never used this like video chat software before," and I'm like, "Bro, you just wait another 6 months."
Yeah. There's a weird amount of foreshadowing in those. There's like 3 or 4 things that you're just like, oh, we're doing like when we go to Comic-Con and we spray the perfume. It's like this weird like airborne comedy thing where everyone's like covering their mouth so they don't like breathe in the weird toxins. Like there's a few things where you're just like, oh, you could never do that. You can't do that now because it feels too reminiscent of whatever, I don't know.
No, you're right. I missed that one, but you're exactly right. It's also a very effective demonstration of like how an airborne something can transmit. Yeah. Oh wow, yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's almost like
almost like we knew.
Almost like you knew. What did you know? No.
Oh boy, I don't want to get into it.
Yeah, that's for another podcast. But
yes.
but as you alluded to, 2020 and the pandemic had a big impact on the George Lucas talk show. I mean, it had an impact on everything. But could you talk about how the pandemic transformed what the George Lucas talk show was and what it is now?
Yeah, I mean, pre-COVID, it was a hour-long monthly show at UCB in New York, and no one saw it. It was for the people in the room, and that was it. He would very occasionally do a touring show. I never went on a touring show, but he did one in London. He did one in like South by Southwest, and a few in LA. But like it wasn't that many things. And then COVID happened, and he being Connor sort of decided, well, that's it. It's done. I guess that's it. We're never going to do the show again. And we were coming up on May 4th, and UCB had closed down unceremoniously and didn't really treat the people who were working there the right way. They didn't get pay once everything closed. Like it was sort of just like, okay, today's your last day. This is your last check. Bye. Which is sad. I understand why it happened. It was sad. It was difficult. Whatever. It wasn't handled right. So we were coming up on May the 4th, and Griffin and I were like, we should really like do something because it would make people feel a lot better. We can use our platform, however small it was at that point, we can use our platform to help some people out. And I think Connor was skeptical because he was like, if this is the first time people see this show and it doesn't work in a video format, then, it's going to turn people off of it forever, whatever. But we were like, let's just try it. Like the worst thing that happens is 100 people see it, and that's the end of that's the end of it. Whatever. And we come back post lockdown, if there is a post lockdown, and do the show normally again, and that's fine. And it went really well, and we raised a lot of money, and we helped out. We were able to give money to help out a lot of people, which was very cool and exciting for us because it was a lot of our friends that were struggling at that point. And then it became a weekly show. And it turned into something where our shortest shows were something we called the Irishman Plus, which meant every single show of ours was at least 1 minute longer than the Irishman. So every week was at least 3.5 hours, normally longer. We hit a point where it morphed from Irishman Plus into Snyder Cut Plus, which meant it was at least 4 hours and 4 minutes long. So it was a lot, and it was a lot for all of us. And some shows of ours were, our first show, that May the 4th show, was 33 hours long. We watched every single live action Star Wars back to back to back. Some of them were 18 hours long. Some of them were 6 hours long. It like really changed week to week, and we never knew how long it was going to be, because it was kind of those, well, when we're not having fun anymore, we'll just say, okay, good night, that's it. And sometimes that would be, oh, we've done 9 hours, I guess we should probably stop, that kind of thing. So it morphed in a lot of ways, because within the first month, we had done 70 live shows, say, at UCB pre-COVID, but within the first month, we had already done more time physically of the show live streaming than we ever did on stage. So that pre-COVID show is like, that's in the minority now of what that show was like. Now it's more like what it is in the live stream, which is different and looser and sillier and weirder, I think, than it ever was, which is good. It's different, and things have to evolve naturally. But after lockdown ended, we took a little bit of a break. People were having health issues. We had to take a time off period, step away for a second, because this was being too much, and the world was opening back up. So it was one of those, like, let's step away for a minute and figure it out. And we just sort of decided, like, we don't have to do this show on a schedule anymore, and we don't have to do every Sunday. We can do it 6 times a year. We can do it 18 times a year. We can do it 1 time a year. Like, it's truly like whatever we feel like, and whether that's a live stream or whether that's, a live show in Detroit and then a live show in Atlanta or whatever, whoever wants us to go somewhere. If it covers our flight and we get a little bit of money out of it, we'll probably go, like it's fun going to different cities. And like, we just went to Seattle and Portland, and like people came up to us being like, I truly never thought you would come here. Like, this is so cool. And that's a very exciting feeling, so the show it's very different now, and it's evolved into whatever we want it to be. And that, I think, is it makes the most sense for us, and it's the most exciting for us right now, because we don't have to feel like we're locked into that rigid structure that it was pre-COVID,
Completely, yeah. Like, the fact that you've been able to arrive at this place where it's sort of flexible to allow you to just do it when you have the inspiration or the motivation or the energy or the opportunity to do it is great. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. I miss doing it as much as we were doing it. There are times where I'm like, I wish we did one this month, or I wish we did more than we've done in the last 6 months. But at the same time, it is nice to, work on other projects and take time off and stuff. But it is weird, like, going from talking to those guys so much, and like, seeing them every week and talking to them for 6 hours, even if it is I'm talking to Watto. Like, they are 2 different people in my brain. Watto and Griffin are 2 different people. But at the same time, like, it's a change going from 400 hours during lockdown to like seeing them once every 2 months or something like that.
No, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Do you think, now that you're primarily a live stream show, do you think that's allowed you to get more well-known guests on the show because it's remote?
For sure. I mean, it's such a, it's an easier ask to be like, you can do this from your bedroom. Like, we've had guests call in from bed, and that's totally fine. I don't care where you are. You can be in the pool on a floaty, and that's totally okay. Rather than being like, can you come to Brooklyn at 9 p.m. and stay for 2 hours, and we probably can't cover your car home. Like, there's a big difference between those 2 things. So it is definitely nice. And like, Julian Glover lives in London, or lives outside of London. Yeah. Probably would never have him. We've done London shows, but like, asking him to come to a comedy club is like probably not feasible. So it definitely has gotten us into different people, and it also has gotten us, like, Weird Al was on, for example, right? And he stayed for like 4 hours, and that would not happen if this was a live show. Us hanging out with Weird Al for 4 hours and like really getting to ask him the stupidest questions we can ask him about his career, and like the weirdest, most esoteric, like, tell us about this one thing that you did in 1986. Like, that we wouldn't have time to do that if it was a live show. And like, the nice thing about the live streams, and I don't know if they feel like this too, but this is how I feel, is I don't really care if everyone watching is having a good time. Does that make sense? Because like,
yeah, because they haven't like left their houses and paid money
totally.
to like show up at a
Yes.
live show. It's like you feel some kind of an obligation.
Yes. And I know if I have a question that I want to ask this guy or whoever it is, I know that there's at least 4 other people who were like, that's an amazing question. I've always wanted to know that, you know? Whereas if you're in a
Yeah.
live show and there's 100 people in the audience, maybe no one cares. But if 900 people are watching at, live, like, you might get that reaction that you want. So I personally prefer the live streams for that reason. But I also, getting that rush of like an audience reaction is also nice. And I know that Griffin and Connor like that because they are primarily live performers,
Right. No, that makes sense. Is there a guest, like, do you have like a white whale of a guest who you would love to get on the show, but you either can't find them or just haven't been able to make it work yet?
Yeah. I mean, my
If you don't want to say, that's fine too.
No, I do. I'm trying to think of I want to give you the list of people. There's some people, look, I want Frank Oz. He's never going to do it. It's never going to happen. I know that in my heart of hearts that it's never going to happen. But I would like to book Frank Oz for something that I work on. My top ones that I want are weird and interesting. I want Carol Kane, the actress Carol Kane. I want Michael Emerson from Lost. And I want Michael McKean. Those are my top 4, I guess. Because they would all be interesting and weird, and they're all different types of people, but I think they would all click in different ways on the show.
I love that answer.
And they're all people I've never been able to book for one reason or another.
Those names were definitely not what I was expecting, but that makes total sense because I mean, like you were saying, you just have like a gut feeling about who would do well on this show.
Yeah.
I hope you get all 3 of them. I mean,
Thank you so much. Yeah. Someday we'll find out.
I mean, now that you've put it out there, like now I want to see them on the show. Like that's super intriguing.
Right? That's what I'm saying. Tell if anyone is friends with any of them, please let us know. We've been close on Carol Kane. We have an in with Carol Kane, and I think it will happen eventually, but the other 2 have been very difficult to lock down, and I hopefully someday.
Interesting.
The other 3, I guess, if we're adding Oz in.
Yeah, Frank Oz, I don't know if I wouldn't say it's a complete definite 100% no.
Yeah.
But
I think he's just a guy where he is friends with George, and I think it would take a lot of convincing to him that we are not making fun of George. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, along those lines, I think someone asked this in the movie, but I'm wondering if you've had any developments since. Do you have any idea? Has it ever gotten back to you? Like, is George Lucas himself aware that this exists? And if not, like, what do you hope he would think about the show?
Yeah. So him directly, I have not gotten word that him directly knows about the show. Okay. But enough people in his orbit know about it and have said I will bring it up to him next time I see him. And also, we've done a few shows at San Francisco Sketch Fest, which is a comedy festival that happens every year in San Francisco. And he's not in San Francisco all the time now. He's got a couple different places that he spends most of his time. But every year that we do it, we're like, we're going to send the ask. It's going to go to his publicist or whatever. And it's going to be a no, but we're going to send it. And we've gone twice, 3 times now, I think. And every single time we've gone twice. We've gone twice, but one got canceled because of Omicron. That's what it was. So we were scheduled to go 3 times. We've asked 3 times. That's the thing. I have gone to his publicist, and every single time we've gotten a response back that is like, listen, we want you to know that we talked about this. This was a real conversation that we had. He can't do it this time, but please keep asking. And we hope that you and Connor and Griffin and everyone else have a great time at the show. It's very specific, and it's very much like not closing the door. Do I think it's ever going to happen? Probably not. Do I want it to happen? Yes, but at the same time, Uh, I would be intrigued to see how it goes. I think the thing that is intrigues us about that interview is that we I probably we wouldn't ask him Star Wars questions. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't care how he came up with Bib Fortuna. It doesn't matter to me, you know? I've heard him talk
Yeah.
about that stuff. Who cares? But like Connor's thing that he wants to talk to him about is like, do you know the Rolling Stones documentary Gimme Shelter?
Yes. He worked on that, right?
So here's the thing. He was an assistant cameraman. It was one of his first jobs, assistant cameraman on Gimme Shelter, which happened at Altamont, where like a guy was murdered by the Hells Angels or something like that. His camera jammed. So none of his footage is in the movie. But we've never heard him talk about it. And we're just like, what was that like? What were your feelings going through that? Like, did you think, oh no, I'm screwed. This is my last job. I'm never going to get hired again. My camera broke. Like, what happened? You know, what do you think about that day? Have you seen the documentary? That kind of stuff. Things like that are what we're interested in. And I think getting that point across to him is the important thing of like, we're not going to ask you, you know, why did you make Jar Jar Binks or whatever, you know, because we're interested in the things that like aren't documented anywhere, you know. We want to talk to you about
Completely.
the TV shows or movies you tried to make that didn't happen, or like what would your personal movies be that you said you were always going to make, you know, when you retired and never show anybody? Have those happened? Are you just holding out on them? Like, what's the deal? Like, stuff like that is just like, he's such an interesting guy, and there's so many levels and facets to that guy that I think are unexplored or untalked about when people talk to him, because people get so excited to be like, oh, I love Indiana Jones, you know, and which is great. Yeah, I love Indiana Jones too, but like, tell me about these other things that are maybe you consider a lesser thing on your career, but we're fascinated by, and not in a ironic way, you know. Um,
Completely. Now I am like, my life isn't going to be complete until I see this interview that you do where you ask him
I
about
know.
his experience working on Gimme Shelter. Like, I'm going to be thinking
Yeah.
about this until you make it
Yes.
happen.
Totally.
Like,
And I look, I hope it the last time that we did Sketchfest was in January, and they got back to us and they were like, he's unfortunately not in town, you know, all that stuff. Thank you so much for asking, blah 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 blah. And then the next day we read in the newspaper, it was like George Lucas hosts Biden fundraiser at his house with president in attendance. And we're like,
all right.
that's the best reason anyone has ever had for not doing the show, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure.
I hope he likes it though. I hope he would like it. I think he knows that, or I think he would figure out that we're not dunking on him like a bunch of other dude bros on the internet, you know? We're doing it out of love, and like I think there's a difference between poking fun and making fun. And I don't think we're ever making fun. I think we are poking fun sometimes at some of the things, but we do that with the acknowledgement of, yeah, but this thing is important, you know? So, I don't know.
Completely. And he seems like a guy that has a sense of humor. Like, he pokes fun at himself.
Totally.
Um,
Totally.
so I think he would get it. Maybe the documentary might
Yeah.
be something more accessible to him that might reach him.
And look, was that something that we were thinking about going into it? Absolutely it was.
Yeah,
Absolutely it was. Yeah. I
for
mean,
sure.
he's the guy. Sometimes we will get people who either worked with him or are nervous about upsetting him, being like, I don't think he would like this because I think maybe he would think, you know, you're making fun of him or whatever. And we say, well, remember in 1977, Mad Magazine did a parody of Star Wars when the movie came out. And they got a call from Lucasfilm's lawyers saying, you know, cease and desist. You can't make this anymore. Stop the presses. Don't print out any more of these. And they said, oh, that's so funny because 2 days ago we got a call from George Direct saying he wanted to buy the artwork. So
Right.
I think people get nervous about upsetting a person like him when in reality they are just trying to save their own skin, which I completely understand. But at the same time, you have to remember, like, this guy's got a sense of humor. Like, you don't make the Family Guy Star Wars, the Robot Chicken Star Wars. You don't have the level of involvement in those, or even Star Wars Detours, which is the unreleased animated show that he made 39 episodes of and then never got released. You know, you don't make those things and you're not able to like laugh at this stuff a little bit. You know.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm telling you, I'm going to be thinking about the possibilities for this George Lucas talk show interviews
Yeah.
George Lucas.
Yeah.
interview for a long, long time. So I really hope it happens. If people want to check out either the documentary or the George Lucas talk show itself, where can they go to find them?
Yeah, so if you want to watch the documentary, it's on VOD right now. We just signed a distribution deal, so it's going to be on VOD in more places soon. I won't say where because I don't know exactly what has been finalized. But if you go to imgeorgelucas.com anytime, no matter when, where the thing ends up, you'll be able to have all the links to go find it there. We're also hoping to get that Blu-ray out by the end of the year. Really pushing for that Blu-ray, really want it. So hopefully by the end of the year, that'll be out. You can watch the Naboo movie at naboomovie.com. That'll redirect you to YouTube. All the George Lucas Talk Show stuff is on YouTube. Just go to our channel. I recommend if you've never seen the show to just find a guest that you like and go from there because you'll probably be able to get into it if you like the guest who's on. It's an easier way to get into it. And then I'm on Instagram at Cotnoir, on Twitter at Patrick Cotnoir, and my website's patrickcotnoir.com, which has got everything that I'm working on. So I think that's everything.
No, yeah, fantastic. I was going to ask if there was anything else you wanted to plug or any upcoming projects, but it seems like if people go to your website, they can see what you're working on.
Stay tuned for episode 2, the episode 2 live read. It's coming, baby.
I am going to do whatever I have to do to be at that reading because that shit was hilarious.
Good. I love it.
So, Patrick, I really appreciate the work that you do and that you continue to do, and thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. Transcripts of this episode and all our other episodes are available at trashcompod.com. You can view the video version of this podcast at youtube.com/@trashcompod. /@ is a hard thing to say.
That's tough, yeah.
And please follow TrashCompod on TikTok and Instagram, and we will see you on the next one.